Hey everybody, Brooks here, First Baptist Church of the Islands. Hope you're having a great day today. Thank you for taking a moment to join me for this 5 for 5, and happy Monday to you. Hey, I wanted to ask a question. How are you doing in the midst of all of this coronavirus stuff? Really, how are you doing? I know back in March and April, we would probably ask that question more often to one another. You get into May and then June, and now we're kind of in the grind and things have heated back up again. And we sort of quit asking the question, how are you doing? Maybe for you, you're really struggling right now. This is a different season. We're in the midst of summer. It is 191 degrees outside, and that just does something that kind of sometimes maybe can discourage you. You get cooped up inside where the air conditioning is, and maybe if you're a parent, your kids are cooped up inside, or maybe you haven't been feeling really well yourself. Maybe you face some financial strain, job loss, or maybe you've even tested positive as well. But nobody's really asked you lately how you're doing. I just want to encourage you today, and I want to encourage you with a verse of Scripture and then the context in which it was written. Years ago, I came across this verse. I forget where I heard it. I think I heard someone quote it before I ever read it. It's in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. And in that verse, it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you a future and a hope." And man, I remember when I heard that verse, it just resonated with me. What a beautiful verse about what God's plan is for you, that He wants what's best for you. He created you to enjoy Him, and that His plans for you are for your good. They're for ultimately your best, to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a future and to give you a hope. Well, what I didn't realize for years really was the context in which that verse was written. In Jeremiah 29, the prophet Jeremiah is writing to God's people, the people of Judah, who, because of their rebellion against God and their hard-heartedness, had refused to come back to God. They wouldn't listen to the prophets. And so God did what He had to do out of love, and that was to discipline them. And it would require severe discipline to bring them back to Himself. And that severe discipline came in the form of the Babylonians, the world power of the day, coming in the 6th century BC and taking His people, God's people, the people of Judah, 1,000 miles away into exile. They would be there not as honored guests. They were there really as captives and slaves, drug out of their homeland. It's in that context that Jeremiah would speak those words of God, that I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you a future and a hope. You know what else Jeremiah would say there in Jeremiah 29? This is what I wasn't aware of, that it's in the context of exile that God also tells them in that land to take wives and become the fathers of sons and daughters, ultimately for them to bear sons and daughters, to multiply there, to seek the welfare of the city where God had sent them, and to pray to the Lord on its behalf, that in its welfare, they would also have welfare. He told them to build houses and live there and to plant gardens. And basically what God was saying there in the midst of exile was bloom where you're planted. God had not left them. God even had a purpose in the midst of their struggle. And that purpose was going to be for His glory, but also to draw their hearts close to Him. And I don't know where you are today. Maybe you're really feeling buried under some of the strain of everyday life. Maybe it is COVID-19. Maybe it's something to do with your job or your career or marriage struggle or some other area of difficulty in your life. Hey, listen, if you're a follower of Jesus, God's made promises to you that He's not going to go back on. And sometimes, if we're not careful, when life gets hard, we can kind of embrace this victim mentality, this woe is me mentality, and really lose sight of what God's called us to do. One, to bloom where we're planted, but number two, that He calls us to Himself, because He hasn't left us. He hasn't gone anywhere. And so whatever you need to do today, just keep that in mind, that if you're a follower of Jesus, He's got a purpose right where you are, and He's going to use this time for good. And if you don't know Christ, man, no better time than right now to just confess your sin to Jesus, knowing that He died and rose for it, that He's God, and if you invite Him in, He'll forgive you and He'll take over your life if you choose to follow Him. Hey, you have a great day today. God bless you.